If you visit Hangzhou for the first time, you'd be forgiven for thinking you've accidentally stepped into an ancient landscape painting. You see the West Lake shrouded in mist, the rolling tea plantations, and you recall Marco Polo calling it the noblest city in the world. It feels like a place where time slows down, a city built for poets, painters, and the quiet trade of silk and porcelain. It is, by all appearances, the most refined and laid-back corner of China. But then, you try to buy a simple bottle of water. You pull out a crisp banknote, and the shopkeeper gives you a look that is part confusion, part pity. It's the same look you might give someone trying to pay for a high-speed rail ticket with a bag of salt. In this city, using physical cash feels like an admission that you are still living in a bygone era. While you are admiring the pagodas, you miss the fact that this artistic hub has quietly evolved into a high-speed digital engine, where even the delivery drivers are part of a hyper-efficient machine that can be summoned in seconds. This is the central paradox of Hangzhou. We are often told the story of China's rise as one of gritty manufacturing and massive factories in the south. But Hangzhou offers a different, perhaps more unsettlingly efficient blueprint. It is the birthplace of Alibaba and the Six Dragons, a place where a man once rejected by KFC in this small apartment ended up building a global empire. It makes you wonder, how did a city famous for its artisan background and refined lifestyle become the epicenter of AI, robotics, and the most aggressive tech incubation strategy on the planet? To understand that, we have to look past the mist on the lake and into a specific, ruthless economic model that turned a community of philosophers into a swarm of digital predators.
That phrase at the end there, a swarm of digital predators, it's such a striking image.
It really is.
Because when you actually sit down with the sources we have for this deep dive, and we're talking economic reports, historical analyses, deep dives into these new tech companies, that tension, that's the one thing that runs through all of it.
It's a central paradox.
Exactly. I think a lot of people make the mistake of assuming that the misty landscape and the digital engine are, well, that they're opposites.
They can't coexist.
Right. But what all this material suggests is that they are actually two sides of the very same coin.
And that's exactly what we're here to unpack, the Hangzhou paradox. And I think we need to be really clear right from the top about the scope of this conversation. For, I don't know, the last 20 years, anytime you heard Hangzhou, you immediately thought of one thing.
Alibaba.
Alibaba. It was the e-commerce city. End of story. But digging through these newer policy papers, the market analyses, it becomes very clear that that era is, well, it's basically over.
Over is a strong word, maybe. Foundational.
Okay, foundational. I'll give you that. Alibaba is the foundation, absolutely. But the building they're putting up on top of it now has a completely different design. We're not just talking about selling stuff online or, digital payments anymore.
No, the sources are incredibly explicit about this. It's a pivot, a major pivot away from what they call soft tech, platforms, consumer apps, services.
Toward hard tech?
Toward hard tech. We're talking about advanced robotics, generative AI models that are genuinely competing with, and in some cases surpassing, what's coming out of the US. We're talking brain-computer interfaces. It's a deliberate shift from the virtual world back into the physical one.
And so the mission for us today for this deep dive is to figure out how. How did a city that was for centuries defined by things like tea and silk manage to so aggressively, so completely re-engineer its own DNA?
Well, see, that's the interesting part. I'm not sure re-engineer is quite the right word either. As I was reading through the background, it felt more like a reawakening.
A reawakening. Okay, I like that. Unpack that for me.
Well, there's just so much evidence that this current digital explosion isn't some new phenomenon. It's more like a digital mutation of a very, very old way of doing business in that region. It's like the source code for the city was written centuries before the first computer ever existed.
You're talking about the Wenzhou model.
I'm talking about the Wenzhou model. To understand the AI labs in Hangzhou today, you have to go back a generation. You have to understand the people who came before. You have to understand the button sellers.
The button sellers, yes. I think that's the perfect place to start. I came across this story about a man, they call him Old Chen, and his life is just... it's a perfect mirror for this Wenzhou model that really laid all the groundwork. So back in the 1980s, you have to picture this. Chen is one of thousands of what they called itinerant traders from Wenzhou. He's literally carrying a heavy bag filled with plastic buttons across China.
No state job, no fancy office.
Nothing. He has a map, a pair of completely worn out shoes, and this almost supernatural ability to spot a market gap before anyone else even knows it's there.
A human algorithm for arbitrage.
That's a great way to put it. Now, fast forward a few decades. His daughter, Lin, she lives in this super sleek apartment in Hangzhou's Binjiang district, the tech hub. She doesn't sell buttons from a bag. She runs a cross-border e-commerce startup.
Right.
But get this, her company uses real-time data to pivot its entire production line for global fashion trends, sometimes within hours.
So she's still spotting the market gap. She just has a server farm helping her do it.
Precisely. And when you look at that family's journey, you see that the institutional blueprint everyone talks about, it isn't just a set of government policies, it's an inherited reflex.
It's muscle memory.
It's muscle memory. Lin's ability to navigate this insane, volatile digital economy is the exact same grassroots flexibility her father used to just survive in the early days of reform. And for me, as someone who follows these trends, seeing how that scrappy, hustling energy of a Wenzhou button salesman became the actual DNA of these billion-dollar tech giants.
It's incredible.
It just reminds you that real innovation isn't always born in a sterile lab. Sometimes it's born in a suitcase full of samples on a dusty road.
And that story, Old Chen's story, it is the quintessential case study for the Wenzhou model. And you're right, you absolutely cannot understand Hangzhou's tech scene today without first dissecting that model.
Because let's do it. What are the mechanics?
Okay, so the academic literature we have, it boils it down to 3 pillars. They call them mass initiativeness, mobility, and markets.
Which sound a little abstract.
They do. They sound like terms from a textbook. But they become very real when you put them in the context of the 1980s.
Right, the context is everything.
Yeah.
So in the 80s, Beijing is the absolute center of the universe for all the state-owned enterprises, the SOEs, these massive, slow industrial giants.
Iron Rice Bowl.
Then you have Shanghai, which is the cosmopolitan darling, right? It's attracting all the foreign investment, the big multinational corporations.
And then there's Zhejiang province, where Hangzhou is the capital. And in the eyes of the central planners in Beijing, Zhejiang was, well, it was basically a blind spot.
It wasn't just a blind spot. It was actively neglected, wasn't it?
It was. The sources are clear on this. Very little good farmland, almost zero state investment, no heavy industry to speak of. So the people there, exactly like Old Chen, they were forced to operate in what the economists call the interstaces.
The cracks.
The cracks in the planned economy. They couldn't get a state contract to build a car or a steel mill, so they focused on all the tiny things the state completely ignored.
Buttons.
Buttons, lighters, shoe soles, zippers, all these small, low-margin but incredibly high-volume products.
And because the local market was too small to absorb all this production, they had to move. That's the mobility piece of the puzzle.
That's the key. One of the sources mentioned that these sales agents, these button sellers, would be on the road for more than 280 days a year.
Wow.
Now, just stop and think about the network effect of that. You have tens, hundreds of thousands of people, all from this one region, physically spreading out across the entire country. They're like human sensors.
They're gathering market intelligence in real time. They're finding out there's a shortage of zippers in Harbin and a surplus of shoe soles in Guangzhou, and they're connecting the dots.
It was a human internet. I love that you said that. They were packet switching data about supply and demand, but doing it manually, decades before the World Wide Web even existed.
It's an incredible image. A distributed network of entrepreneurs.
And that's why when the actual internet arrived, when Alibaba was founded in Hangzhou in the late 90s, the software for entrepreneurship was already running in people's minds. The culture was already there.
So Lin, the daughter from the story, she didn't have to go to business school to learn about arbitrage or supply chain management or rapid pivoting.
It was the air she breathed growing up. It was dinner table conversation. She just took the family's core competency and swapped the heavy bag of buttons for a server rack and a logistics platform.
There's this quote from Jack Ma in one of the articles we reviewed that just, it nails this dynamic perfectly.
I think I know the one you're talking about.
He said something like, in Beijing, you have to compete with the state. In Shanghai, you have to compete with the big foreign multinationals.
But in Hangzhou, the private domestic company is the only child.
The only child.
Yeah.
And we all know how the only child gets treated, right?
Yeah.
They get all the attention, all the resources.
And think about why. The local government in Zhejiang didn't have those big state-owned industrial giants to lean on for tax revenue. Their entire budget was dependent on these scrappy, private, grassroots entrepreneurs.
So they couldn't afford to crush them with red tape and bureaucracy.
They had to help them, or at the very least, they had to get out of their way. It was a matter of survival for the government, too.
And that environment, that lack of a safety net.
Yeah.
It created a very specific kind of founder, didn't it?
Yeah.
The survivalist mindset. You have to be scrappy. You have to be innovative by necessity, not by choice.
Right. But if we zoom out even further, this whole story of resilience, it's not just about the last 40 years of reform.
No, not at all. To really get the full picture of Hangzhou's gravity, you have to look much, much further back in time. This modern tech boom, it feels so new and sudden, but there's a historical echo here that is, frankly, a little spooky.
You're jumping to the Song Dynasty connection.
I am. I mean, just picture it. Imagine you're walking through the mist on the West Lake. You see the silhouette of the Leifing Pagoda. You can almost feel the weight of 1,000 years of commerce in the air. I was reading this blog post by a historian, and he drew a direct line from the bustling imperial street of the Southern Song Dynasty to the modern-day campuses of Alibaba and Ant Group.
That's a bold comparison.
It is, but listen to this. He tells the story of a merchant family from the 12th century. They specialized in silk and tea, and they were navigating a city that was, at that time, the most prosperous commercial heart of the entire world.
The center of the world economy.
Exactly. And that family's business, it survived dynastic shifts, it survived wars, it survived centuries of change. But the commercial soul of the city, he argues, it never actually vanished.
So what we're seeing today isn't a new creation.
That's his point. When we see Hangzhou as this global tech powerhouse, we're actually witnessing what he called civilizational resilience. It's so easy to look at a glass skyscraper and only see what's new. But he believes we're actually seeing a return to a historical equilibrium.
I like that framing, a return to equilibrium.
Yeah. From that perspective, Hangzhou isn't becoming a leader. It's just reclaiming a seat at the table that it held 800 years ago. And reading about that continuity, it makes the current tech boom feel less like some random accident of the 21st century.
And more like an inevitability.
Exactly. Like the inevitable waking up of a sleeping giant. It gives all the cold, hard data about GDP growth this sense of, I don't know, poetic justice, of deep-rooted human endurance.
Civilizational resilience is a very powerful way to put it. And the historical data, it absolutely backs up this idea of a return to equilibrium. We're talking about the Southern Song Dynasty, specifically from 1127 to 1279. During that period, Hangzhou wasn't just another prosperous city.
No.
By most serious historical estimates, it was the largest and most advanced economy on the entire planet.
I mean, we're talking about a time when cities like London and Paris were, relatively speaking, muddy backwaters.
That's not an exaggeration. The sources say Hangzhou had a population of over 1 million people. It was a genuine metropolis built on commerce. And here's the really crucial part.
Go on.
This is where the world's first government-issued paper currency, the jiaozi, was first widely circulated and accepted.
Okay, that's a fascinating detail.
Now think about this. The global headquarters of Ant Group, the fintech giant that effectively popularized digital currency and made physical cash obsolete in modern China, it sits on the exact same soil where paper money was pioneered almost a millennium ago.
That's incredible. It's like the ghosts of those 12th century bankers are still in the boardroom. The medium of exchange has changed from, mulberry bark paper to binary code, but the core commercial instinct is identical.
And it's not just finance, it's the lifestyle brand of the city. There's that famous idiom, above there's heaven, below there is Suzhou and Hangzhou.
Right. It's been the marketing slogan for the region for centuries. It's always been sold as this earthly paradise.
But that's the paradox again, isn't it? Paradise implies leisure. It implies sitting by the lake, writing poetry, drinking tea. And one of our sources mentions a Soviet advisor, a guy named A.C. Maxim, who visited in the 1950s.
What did he think?
He looked at the beauty of the West Lake and he called it the Geneva of the East. He envisioned it as a place for tourism, for diplomacy, for rest, a conference center.
And in a way, he was right. I mean, they hosted the G20 summit there in 2016. That prophecy was fulfilled.
It was. But this is what creates the duality that really defines the modern city. You have the West Lake side of the city, that's the Geneva side, the tourist and poet side.
The landscape painting.
The landscape painting. But then you cross the Kontang River into the Binjiang district, and you are immediately in a different world. You're in a futuristic, high-velocity digital engine room.
That physical separation is so interesting. It's almost like the city has a split personality. The leisure capital brand attracts all the top talent, because who wouldn't want to live in paradise?
Of course.
But once they get there, that old Wenzhou spirit kicks in, and they work like absolute maniacs.
And that's what the sources call the Alibaba spillover. For so many years, Alibaba was the sun in this entire solar system. Everything revolved around it. But then, inevitably, those early employees, their stock options vested.
They became wealthy?
Very wealthy. And they had the technical know-how from building one of the world's most scalable platforms. But because of that deep-seated grassroots entrepreneurial culture we talked about, they didn't just retire and buy a villa on the lake.
No, they left. They started their own companies.
Yeah.
The Alibaba graduates.
Exactly. The Alibaba mafia, some call it. And this diaspora of talent, this is what created the ecosystem that allowed the city to make its next big pivot.
And that brings us right to the heart of the new data. We're seeing this massive shift away from soft tech, e-commerce, food delivery apps, all that.
To the six little dragons.
The six little dragons. It honestly sounds like a Kung Fu movie alliance or something.
It does, but these are the companies that are building the actual infrastructure of the future. The list includes names that are, rapidly becoming global powerhouses in their fields. You've got DeepSeek, Unitary Robotics, Game Science,
CloudMinds, Kujiale, and BrainCo.
And just look at the diversity in that list. This is not 6 smaller copies of Alibaba. This is something completely new.
The one that really jumped out at me from the research was DeepSeek.
The AI model startup.
Right. Because the common narrative, especially in the West, is that, true, cutting-edge AI innovation happens in, Silicon Valley or deep inside a research lab at Google or MIT.
But that's not DeepSeek's origin story at all.
Not even close. It's spun out of a hedge fund called Highflyer.
And that detail is absolutely critical to understanding their approach. Highflyer is a quantitative hedge fund. These are people who build and use complex algorithms to trade stocks at incredibly high frequencies.
Their entire world is built on mathematical efficiency and speed.
Exactly. They didn't come at AI from a university philosophy department wondering about the nature of consciousness. They came at it from the brutal reality of the financial markets.
So when they set out to build a large language model, their primary goal isn't to write beautiful poetry. It's to maximize efficiency.
It's a market-driven innovation model. The sources point out that their open-source models are challenging U.S. dominance precisely because they are so much more efficient to run and fine-tune. They approached AI as a hardcore optimization problem, which is a fundamentally different perspective than a pure academic lab might take.
Okay, then you have Unitary Robotics. I've seen the videos. I think everyone has seen the videos of their robot dogs doing backflips and things.
Unitary is the perfect example of what the policy papers call embodied intelligence.
Embodied intelligence.
Yeah, it's the idea of taking AI out of the cloud, off the server, and putting it into a physical body that can actually interact with the real world. And again, look at their market strategy. They aren't just building million-dollar prototypes for military contracts. They're relentlessly focused on the consumer market. They are trying to sell these things on a mass scale.
It's the same pattern again.
Yeah.
They're trying to commoditize advanced robotics in the exact same way that old Chen commoditized plastic buttons 40 years ago.
It is the exact same reflex. Find the market, drive down the cost, and then scale the production like crazy.
And we have to talk about game science. Because Black Myth, Wukong, this isn't just a tech story. This is a massive cultural story.
It's China's first real, globally recognized AAA game. The pre-sale numbers shattered records. It was a statement. It proved that Hangzhou could produce high-fidelity digital art that resonates with a global audience.
It's a projection of soft power, but it's built on a foundation of hard tech.
A perfect way to put it. And then you round out the list with CloudMinds doing cloud-based service robots, Kujiale using AI for spatial design, and BrainCo. BrainCo is literally hooking human brains up to computers.
It's a mind-bogglingly broad and ambitious portfolio for just one city. But this brings me to the big question that's been nagging at me through all this. Why Hangzhou? We've talked about the history, we've talked about the culture, but lots of cities have interesting histories. You can't build a world-class robotics industry on good vibes alone. You need chips, you need land, you need a ton of power, and you need permits. You need the state.
And this is where we have to talk about the role of the state. But, and this is a huge but, it is not the caricature of the state that we so often see portrayed in Western media. It's not some rigid monolith barking down orders from Beijing. It's something much more subtle and, frankly, much more effective.
I saw this video recently. It was from a robotics lab in Hangzhou's future sci-tech city. And it was all about this young engineer named Wei. Wei doesn't work on social media apps or video games. He spends 16 hours a day, every day, calibrating the tactile sensors on a robotic arm, an arm that's designed for high-end semiconductor manufacturing.
So core hard tech.
Deep hard tech. And his story is basically the human face of Hangzhou's entire strategic pivot. There's this palpable sense of mission in his work. This feeling that every tiny millimeter of precision he achieves is a direct contribution to the country's economic sovereignty.
Right.
And look, I know when we hear terms like state capacity or industrial upgrades, it can sound very top-down, very rigid, especially to us in the West.
Right.
But watching Wei's exhaustion and then his absolute triumph when the machine finally mimicked a perfect human grip, you feel the other side of that story.
It's not just a policy directive.
No. The political framing is about national strength, sure.
Yeah.
But the human reality is a generation of engineers who genuinely believe that their intellectual labor is building a more secure, a more self-reliant future for their kids. As someone who analyzes these shifts, I see this pivot not just as a policy, but as this collective human effort to move from the virtual world of apps back to the physical world of steel and silicon.
Wei's story is the perfect illustration of the human engine that drives what the policy papers just call state capacity. But the specific mechanism, the actual governing tool that Hangzhou uses to harness all that energy, it's really unique. It's called the industrial chain chief model.
The chain chief. I have to admit, it sounds a little militaristic. I am the chief of the chain.
It does sound rigid, doesn't it? But in practice, the sources all describe it as being surprisingly fluid and responsive. The whole model actually emerged during the US-China trade war and the supply chain chaos of COVID-19.
So it was born out of crisis.
Exactly.
Right.
The government realized that just throwing money or subsidies at companies wasn't enough if their supply chains were broken. So for every single critical industry robotics in Hangzhou, eyewear manufacturing in Wenzhou, pharmaceuticals down in Taizhou, they appoint a specific government official to be the chain chief.
And what does a chain chief actually do all day? Are they sitting in boardrooms telling the CEOs what products to build?
No, and that is the absolute key distinction. They are not running the companies. Their entire job is to look at the whole ecosystem for their industry and find the broken links.
So they're troubleshooters.
They're ecosystem troubleshooters. If a robotics factory can't get a specific type of sensor because it's stuck in customs, the chain chief's job is to get on the phone and get it unstuck. If a startup needs a safe place to test its new autonomous vehicles, the chain chief works with the city planners to close down a few city blocks for them.
The sources use this very specific and very humble term for the style of governance. It's Dianzhou.
Yes, the waiter mentality. The literal translation is shop assistant. The government officials are explicitly trained to see themselves as service staff for the city's entrepreneurs.
I found this anecdote in the notes about Game Science, the studio that made Black Myth Wukong. And honestly, I found it almost hard to believe.
You're talking about the meal deliveries, aren't you?
The meal deliveries. So the studio was in crunch time, which, as you know, in the gaming industry means you're basically living at the office, working around the clock. The local government didn't just help them navigate the incredibly complex world of publishing licenses. They actually organized for daily meals to be delivered to the office so the developers wouldn't have to waste a single minute ordering food.
It's intense. It's like, here is your regulatory approval, and here is your Kung Pao chicken.
Right. It sounds kind of funny, but think about the powerful signal it sends to a company. It says, we want you to succeed so badly that we are willing to handle the most basic logistics of your daily life.
There's another great example with Unitary Robotics. When they were first developing their robot dogs, they knew they needed to secure their patents really fast to protect their intellectual property.
A huge issue for any hardware startup.
A life or death issue. So the government didn't make them fill out 100 forms and wait in line at the Catton office for 6 months. They sent a team to Unitary's headquarters to process all the applications on site in person.
It's a concierge service. It's a total inversion of the typical bureaucratic model where the company is fighting against the state. In Hangzhou, the state is actively clearing the path for them.
The model is the government provides the soil. That means the subsidies, the access to computing power, the data centers, the open source platforms, and then they just step back.
They let the plants grow wild.
They don't try to design the flower. They just make sure the irrigation system is working perfectly.
And the ultimate goal of all this nurturing, it's laid out very clearly in the 15th five-year plan. They want Hangzhou to be the global city for AI innovation by 2030.
Right.
And not just for the tech companies, but for integrating AI into everything. The example of the Wenzhou Silk Company in the notes was so striking to me.
Oh, yes. Wenzhou is this ancient heritage brand, a traditional silk company, but they are now using generative AI to design their scarves.
How does that work?
The AI can generate thousands of unique, incredibly intricate patterns in a matter of seconds. Patterns that a human designer might never even conceive of. It's the perfect synthesis of the city's two souls, the Song Dynasty silk trade and the Six Dragons technology.
So putting it all together, you have the ancient commercial history, you have the scrappy button seller DNA, and you have this hyper-efficient waiter government. It really does sound like an unstoppable machine.
It does.
But the sources also point out that there's a lot of debate about what to even call this ecosystem. The lazy comparison, the one everyone reaches for, is to call it the Silicon Valley of China.
And almost every single source we looked at completely rejects that comparison. Hangzhou is not Silicon Valley.
So why not? It seems to have all the ingredients, the tech, the capital, the smart people.
But the underlying structure is fundamentally different. Silicon Valley is defined by two things. Sand Hill Road, which is that deep, multi-generational venture capital ecosystem, and direct university spinouts. You know, Google and Sun Microsystems came directly out of research at Stanford. In Hangzhou, it's different. While many of the founders are graduates of the excellent Zhejiang University, they didn't start their companies in their dorm rooms.
They went out into the world first.
They went out, they worked at Alibaba, they got their hands dirty in the real market for years.
It's a digital predator ecosystem. That phrase from the beginning. It's built on market survival, not on academic prestige or patient VC nurturing.
Which arguably makes it more ruthless. And that brings us inevitably to the cost. We can't have this entire conversation about hyper-efficiency without also talking about the human toll.
The paradox again, the other side of the coin.
Exactly. We have this romantic image of the leisure capital, the tea, the poetry, the beautiful lake. But the day-to-day reality for the people actually working in the high-tech zones of Xinjiang is the infamous 99.6 culture.
9 a.m. to 9 p.m., 6 days a week.
And the sources are pretty clear that this isn't just a personal choice. It's seen as a basic requirement for survival in this predator ecosystem.
Which creates this massive citywide tension. You have the artistic hub brand clashing directly with the ruthless economic model reality.
And that Alibaba spillover we mentioned, the flood of new wealth, it drove real estate prices through the roof, effectively pushing out the actual artists and poets who gave the city its leisurely reputation in the first place.
And then there's the city brain.
The city brain, the citywide AI system that runs all the municipal services.
On the one hand, it sounds amazing.
It is, in many ways. It governs traffic flow, it detects accidents in real time, it optimizes water usage. It makes the city unbelievably efficient. You can access any government service you need on your phone in seconds.
Oh, that.
But it also means the city is constantly watching, constantly measuring, and constantly optimizing every single interaction. It's the technological opposite of a laid-back vibe. If every single intersection is optimized by an algorithm to minimize wait times, where's the room for just meandering? Where's the space for the slow boat on the lake? That's the really unsettling part. You step off the high-speed train, and you arrive in a city that looks like a beautiful landscape painting, but it runs like a silicon motherboard.
And that is precisely why Hangzhou is probably the most significant economic experiment happening in the world right now. It is testing a fundamental question.
Which is?
Can you have both? Can you have the deep cultural soul of the Song Dynasty and the hyperspeed of the AI revolution coexisting in the exact same space?
So let's just recap the journey we've taken in this deep dive. We started with the button sellers of Wenzhou, these traders walking hundreds of miles in worn-out shoes, just looking for a market gap.
We saw how their children and grandchildren inherited that exact same reflex and just applied it to the digital world.
Then we saw how the city itself is, in a way, reclaiming a position of global commercial dominance it last held 800 years ago.
And how a uniquely responsive waiter government is serving this new generation of little dragons who are building the physical hard-tech infrastructure of the future. It's a fusion, really, a fusion of these ancient commercial instincts, this deep-seated cultural need to trade and innovate.
With a very modern, state-orchestrated, futuristic ambition.
It's a blueprint that seems uniquely suited to Hangzhou, but it's one that you can be sure the rest of the world is watching very, very closely.
The sources all seem to suggest that Hangzhou's model is one of a kind, this strange mix of waiter governance and absolutely ruthless market competition. But as other cities, places like Nanjing and Hefei start asking themselves, what does Hangzhou have that we don't? The real question, the one that's left unanswered, might be this. Can this model of hyper-efficiency and hard-tech sovereignty coexist indefinitely with that poetic, leisurely soul that Marco Polo admired all those centuries ago? Or will the digital engine eventually consume the landscape painting entirely?